everyone and welcome. Today is a special moment for us at HES Talks because we are beginning a new online format. We are stepping outside our usual spaces and reaching out to people across India and even beyond. These talks will remain informal, open and real. Not about speeches, but about dialogue, about connection. And I'm so excited to introduce you to someone truly special, an amazing person with a passionate heart and mind, who has dedicated much of his life to rethinking and reshaping the place of education in our society. Dilip Thakore is the publisher and editor of EducationWorld, the human development magazine, which has been running uninterrupted since 1999 and just celebrated 25 years of continuous publication. EducationWorld is India's and maybe even Asia's first magazine focused fully on education. And I like how you, Dilip, framed your mission to build the pressure of public opinion to make education number one on the national agenda. And today we're opening this new chapter with a powerful question. Why should every citizen be a quality education for all evangelist? This topic connects with the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 by the United Nations that calls for inclusive, equitable and quality education for all. Dilip, I'd love to begin by hearing your thoughts as a human, as a professional who has watched this education landscape evolve for decades.
Okay, so why have I chosen this subject, that every citizen should be an QEFA evangelist, that is quality education for all? Well, the main reason for that is because as a consequence of neglecting education for almost 7 decades, Indian economy is in very poor shape. Although our leaders and so on tell us that India is a very great nation and we're doing very well, actually that's not true. India is one of the poorest nations in the world. In terms of GDP, our GDP is only for 1.4 billion people, is only about less than $4 trillion. Against that, China's is about $18 trillion, and the United States is $29 trillion. So you can see the big gap. And even in per capita GDP, India's GDP is only $2,600. China's is $13,500. Russia's is about $10,000, and United States is about $80,000. So you can see we have a long way to go, and this is, according to me, this is because we have neglected education for far too long. And even this small income GDP and income that I've talked about is very unevenly distributed. 1% of the population owns about 20% of national wealth, and 10% owns about 66%, and the remaining about 90% of people in this country are very poor. In fact, they have a per capita income, according to some media pundits, of less than sub-Saharan Africa. So, this is a very, a pathetic state to be in. It's very cruel to the vast majority of our population. And I've tracked it for the last 25 years since it started EducationWorld. I've been trying to convey or impact the message that unless we address and make QEFA, that's quality education for all, especially primary and secondary education, available to all children, we are not going to come out of this trap that we are stuck in. So, what is the manifestation of poor education? Poor education results in poor productivity in the workplace. So if you go to, if you look at Indian agriculture, if you study Indian agriculture, our per hectare yields, even in the Punjab, which is our most agriculturally productive state, is only 1 half of China for rice and wheat, and 1/10 of countries like the Ukraine, France, America, 1/10 for the same acre. And if you look in industry also, our productivity is very poor. The productivity of one American shop floor worker will be equal to the productivity of what 10 Indians. So, and if you look at even in government, that's so obvious to us. The productivity is very poor. Files move so slowly. Decisions are made so slowly. And look at the judiciary. Even we have 50 million pending cases in India's courts. Very poor productivity in all sectors of the economy. That means the more capital you put in, most of it is wasted because it doesn't result in commensurate productivity. So the real reason, the root cause of all this is poor quality education, starting from early childhood education, primary education, secondary education, undergrad education, university education. All along, it's very poor quality education. And one of the main reasons why it's so poor, and even skills education, we hardly have, for example, China has 500,000 skilling centers. India has 15,000. And Russia and other countries have, they've paid a lot of attention to skilling. Whereas India, we have not paid attention to skilling. Children who leave school all go into colleges and university and get bachelor's degrees in commerce and so on, which is not really a skill. Whereas there's a big shortage in India of plumbers, carpenters, skilled people, and because we've neglected poor planning of the education sector, we've neglected skilling education. Recently, only in the new education policy, there's a big emphasis on skilling. But according to me, all children who leave school don't have to go to university or college. In fact, most of them should go into skilling to become good plumbers, carpenters, electricians, construction workers. All these sectors in the Indian economy is full of unskilled people who are learning on the job. Therefore, the poor productivity I was talking to you about. There's a metric in economics called incremental capital output ratio. That means if you put in 10 units of capital, you should get about 20 units of output, at least. But in India, for 4 units we put in, we get only 1 unit of output. And this, according to me, and I was the founder editor of India's first 2 business magazines, Business India and Business World. And so I studied business for many years, 10, 20 years. They were the first 2 business magazines. And I find very poor productivity in Indian industry. And the reason is poor education.
And what is the root of these problems? If we just go to the primary root, is it about bad planning, bad strategizing of education, or something related to content implementation part? Where the starting point we need to focus?
Yeah, well, the first thing is the country has to spend more money on education. Way back in 1967, there was a high-powered commission set up by one Mr. Kothari, who was the chairman of the University Grants Commission then, which recommended that we should spend at least 6% of our GDP on education. Well, that was 1967. It still hasn't happened. We've been averaging only 3.3 to 3.5%. So we're not spending enough. The result is that government schools, for example, in rural India, don't have proper chairs, tables, blackboards. Forget about laboratories and lavatories and libraries. They don't have any of these facilities. So children are not even in a position to self-learn. Apart from that, there are many problems about teachers not coming to school. 25% of government school teachers don't attend every day. 1.25 million teachers are absent every day, and they're not, nobody's checking this. They're not accountable. So one of the first problems that we have not spent enough money on education. Simultaneously, at the university level, we are over subsidizing education. Cost of a university degree in India's government colleges, like a few, not even, is a few hundred rupees a month. It's too low. The result is that even our universities are short of funds because there's not enough money invested by government in education and not enough money collected by higher education institute, government higher institution, by way of fees. So we have always said that you should have targeted subsidization of education. That means the people who need subsidization should be given scholarships, given bursaries. But that's not what happens in higher education in India. If Mukesh Ambani's son goes to a government college, he pays the same fees as a farmer's son who goes there. That's one of the reasons.
Yeah, but if we just, I think that problems are at each and every level, starting from the strategy, because everything should be planned. Even the amount which is just given for education, it should be used wisely. And we need to, I don't know,
Yes.
from my perspective, it is not about only money, though it matters a lot. I agree absolutely. But also about focus. What is the focus of the strategy of developing education? And my question is that as you have worked so many years just watching this landscape evolving, educational landscape evolving, do we have any good tendencies so that we can just have a hope that something has started changing? Or
Yes.
what is your perspective?
That's a good question. First strategy is that you must spend more on primary and early childhood education.
Agree.
Whereas all the governments spend about two-thirds only on two-thirds of their budgets on primary and secondary, and one-third of the budget on higher education. Like I told you earlier, that higher education is over subsidized, and early childhood and primary education is underfunded. The result is that the middle class, as you might have noticed, totally avoids government school education. We have created an entirely new parallel private school system in this country, and where you pay, the entire middle class goes to private schools in India, where they pay, normative tuition fees. So according to me, whatever parents spend in private schools, government should spend the same amount per child in government schools.
It would be great.
No, it's not difficult. People say we don't have the money. So if you go to the March issue of EducationWorld, we have given you an alternative budget, given the government of India an alternative budget for the last 10 years, telling them how to mobilize that money, how to mobilize the finance. Cut here, cut there, cut here, cut subsidies, cut middle class subsidies, cut higher education subsidization, cut government unproductive expenditure. So we've given various cuts. Cut here. What would you do if tomorrow you had to send your child to school, but you didn't have enough money? What will you do? You have to cut somewhere else, right? So government has to do the same thing. The government owns 256 public sector enterprises in which trillions of dollars have been invested. But they are totally unproductive. Not totally, but they are substantially unproductive. They have a very low return on investment. So I'm telling the government for the last 10 years, please sell those public sector enterprises, take the money and invest it in human development, education.
You see, I heard when I participated in the UNESCO forum just recently, and there was a speaker from Singapore, And I liked, he said a very interesting thing. He said that because the policy of Singapore on reskilling their population is amazing. They put so much money. And he said that, you see, Singapore has only one resource: humans. That's why
Human.
all money, yes, humans, so that we give money for human development and lifelong. So they have this kind of amazing programs, nearly half funded or fully funded. They have different levels of programs for all age groups to reskill, to learn something new. And it is not only an option, it is already in the consciousness of a population. So they reskill, and even the industries and businesses, they are given that kind of opportunities. They are funded by the government so that their workers can be upskilled. So
Yes.
amazing policies. So we can learn from, for example, South Korea. They have a very interesting strategy of development, the education system. They put lots of money. They do a little bit in a different way. But when I see this kind of things, and by the way, I have heard Indian politician from India, his speech, and according to that, India has everything. All is good, all is great.
Not at all. Not at all. It's actually a case of the blind leading the blind. You see, most of our politicians have all come out of the rural areas, government schools, poor education. One would have thought they would have understood that education is. I mean, there is no country in world history which has become wealthy without being well educated, except unless you take some of the Arab countries where they have oil. But even they are investing heavily in human resource development.
Yeah.
So our whole model, I'm sorry to say, it was inspired by the Soviet Union way back in the 50s, that we should go in for the heavy industry development model, build factories, steel factories, etc., etc. It was a wrong decision. We should have gone like all the Asian countries, first build small scale industry, and gradually they develop into large companies and go into heavy industry. We try to do it the other way around. And the result is that we've always had a chronic supply, a chronic shortage of investable resources, especially for education. And that's ironic because our greatest resource is actually, like you said, our people. We have 1.4 billion people, and we have not always been poor. Until 1757, India was the richest region in the whole world. We had everything. We had shipbuilding industry, but that time there was no public sector. Government did not interfere in business. Businessmen did business. They did well. They paid taxes. Government took some of those taxes and invested it in education, health, infrastructure. That is the prescription for countries becoming rich. We have tried to do it the other way around, and we are still not out of it. Dr. Arvind Panagria, who's now the chairman of the 16th Finance Commission, just published a book saying the shadow of socialism, which started, Nehruvian socialism, it started with Prime Minister Nehru in 1956, is still not eradicated in India. There are a lot of people who still believe, because they don't know the facts which I just told you, that India is in a very poor condition. It's not at all a wealthy nation. We are in poor condition because we have not invested in human resource development. The first step we have to take is that we have to develop our human resources, that are children, so that we can, otherwise the goal set by Prime Minister for Modi for Viksit Bharat, that is developed India, and a GDP of $30 trillion by 2047, when India will be 100 years of independence, are not going to be achieved. So for the last 25 years in education world, we have a single message: invest in human development, invest in QEFA. That is the starting point of all development. Only when that happens, then you get efficient use of resources, money, capital, land, labor. Only when people are well educated. Today, a farmer, he can't read and write, he can't read an ordinary leaflet, how much fertilizer to put, how much nitrogen to put, because the ACER reports published by the Pratham Foundation show that class 7 children can't read class 2 textbooks in rural India because they're not taught. They're just promoted automatically. And so they come out of the system and then they're not literate. They're quasi-literate. A farmer can't follow a simple instruction on a leaflet, how much fertilizer to put, how much nitrogen to put, how much phosphate to put, how much pesticide to put. So the result is very poor productivity through the Indian economy. The Indian shop floor worker also can barely read and write. He's learning on the job. There are not enough skilling academies in this country. So ultimately, it boils down to poor productivity.
But what I want to say, you see, what I really appreciate in Indian education system, because I can compare two different systems, for example, Russian system and Indian system. And what I really appreciate here, educators, they are given freedom to create, freedom to develop. I understand there is a huge difference between rural schools, rural education, and education in some private schools, so that this is a huge range of different kind of things. But along with that, we're speaking about policies. It is given this kind of freedom and choice, which is very important. You have different boards. You can develop your own curriculum, textbooks according to the syllabus, according to guidelines, national education policy. But anyway, so that even teachers are welcome to just come up with something innovative. This part, unfortunately, in Russia, it is not possible. When I explain what we are doing here in India, I mean, Russian educators there, just to see, it is not possible, because if it is not, if you don't have any stamp from, I mean, the government, you cannot move left or right even a single step. So this is the problem. So that part, it really gives. So there are some good, I would say, good foundation to create something, if we speak about quality of education. Because if you go into this curriculum part, I mean, not only, I mean, material part, which is obviously is needed, right? So walls, we need desks, we need everything, so that children can come to some place to start the learning journey, right? But curriculum,
Marina, the Russians did a lot of things very wrong. In fact, we copied the economic development model from Russia, and both were wrong, because they started with heavy industry. That was Stalin. He said, first, let's build up a heavy industry capability. But one very right thing that Russia did is they invested in primary education.
Yes.
Basic literacy, and right at the start, after the Russian Revolution, which India didn't do. The result is that today Russia, though they may not have the freedom, like you say, to teach, and they may not have that much innovation, they nevertheless have much greater foundational numeracy and literacy than India has. We have a large number, millions, according to me, hundreds of millions of people who don't have good foundational FLN, foundational literacy and numeracy. The result of that is that we are not able to, that's why Russia is way ahead, despite all its problems, despite the lack of freedom, the lack of innovation. It's way ahead of India, because we did not pay sufficient education to FLN, foundation, literacy and numeracy. And that we have to correct as soon as we can, because unless all people in India are literate and really literate, not today the test of literacy is if you can read and write your own name, you are considered literate. That's not a real test of literacy. So children, if the next generation is to improve, they have to be given QEFA, like I said, quality education for all.
So, and my question is, as when we discussed the topic and you suggested that, and I was, wow, that's good. What do you mean? And actually, this is the question which first came to my mind, that why should everyone become this quality
Evangelist.
education? Yes, evangelist. Everyone. This part, how?
Yes.
How it is
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. See, all people in the country, any country, have two duties. One is to do their own work. All right. The second duty of every citizen is to be an active citizen. That means you have to get involved in causes larger than your job. And especially in a democracy, you must practice democracy.
Absolutely.
I find that most Indians don't practice democracy.
They are
And
waiting.
yeah, they are waiting for somebody else to do it.
Yes, absolutely. Someone should.
And I believe that government must be made accountable by every citizen. We have to question the government. We have to put pressure, like I said, put the pressure of public opinion. We have to put pressure on government to do the right things, to get the right priorities. The right priorities first attend to education, second attend to agriculture, third attend to small scale industry and medium scale industry. Then you go into heavy industry and so on. We didn't do that. We got all our priorities wrong. And there was, because most people, even educated middle class people, they don't practice evangelism. They don't practice democracy. They don't practice active citizenship. So my
Absolutely.
message to everybody is, sorry?
Absolutely agree. Absolutely.
You
Because you
agree?
see, this is, we need to put, you see, no one wants to take responsibility. They think that everything will be done by someone, somewhere, somehow.
Someone
What
else.
about
Yeah.
you? You see,
Yes.
you need to take, this is about democracy, this is about education. It's not, education is not only with schools, it's not only with educators,
Correct.
not only with
Absolutely.
policymakers. It starts
Correct.
from, families, from your attitude, from your, active participation in everyday life at different levels.
Yes.
So that this part we need really to bring this awareness to people, because really this kind of shift of consciousness needs to be done, because most of them, they're in the waiting mode. That's it.
Yes. You see, what many years ago, in the mid 1930s, there was a very Nobel laureate called Professor Arnold Toynbee. He wrote a very seminal study of a book in 8 volumes called A Study of History. In that, his basic point was that, in every great civilization is built by a creative minority. That's the middle class, upper middle class, and they come up with the big ideas that help a civilization to grow, to become a high productive society. They have to come up with inventions, innovations, etc. That is our role, if the middle class, so that everybody benefits, and people at the bottom of the pyramid also benefit. But when the middle class stops being creative and becomes oppressive, they think only about themselves. They're only caught up in their own narrow worlds, in their own bubble. They don't worry about the people at the bottom of the pyramid. Then the proletariat secedes from the civilization, and civilizations crumble and fall. And he has given, if you read, there's a 1 volume concise uh, 1 volume abridged version of this 8 volume study of history. They give so many examples why the Egyptian empire collapsed, the Roman empire collapsed, the Russian empire, communist empire collapsed. It's because the nomenclatura in Russia, and the middle class, the party members, they became an oppressive minority. They lost the support of the people. And that is why the communist empire in Russia collapsed. That is why much greater civilizations collapsed. It is our duty as middle class people, as communicators, educators, we have to come up with great inventions, great ideas which benefit the entire population. And one of the great ideas that you must educate the entire population so they can become self-sufficient. You must teach people how to fish, not give them a fish.
Yes.
People in government of India are still not understood that you're giving away free rations. Free rations is not as good as teaching people how to grow free rations. And that's not happened in the Indian development effort, and that is the tragedy. And that is what Education World is been promoted 25 years ago. We are now 25 years old this year, to make education the number one item. And by that we mean true education, not reading and writing. So people understand, they can become productive, and they can become self-sufficient, and they can have some dignity. See,
So
it's
in this
not enough to
case,
create employment. It's not enough to create employment. Watchmen sitting in plastic chairs. There's no dignity in it. Or delivery boys delivering Zomato or dinners. You must have dignified employment that can only come through good, sound, robust education system.
if I would just request you just to outline, I would say that what is, from your perspective, is quality education, because this is the key point here. I mean, just quality.
Yes.
What would you just, I mean, focus? What are these focus points we need to keep in mind while developing these, I would say, policies, strategies?
Yeah. Well, according to me, quality education is education which teaches you how to apply the knowledge that you learn in school. We all are given knowledge, right? But nobody bothers in the education system. How do you apply that knowledge? If
Absolutely,
you,
yeah.
you learn mathematics, you learn history, how do you apply that mathematics in your everyday life? For that, you have to have a lot of emphasis on skilling education, which is a total area of darkness of Indian education of the last 70 years. So teachers teach, but they teach you to memorize and you don't apply that knowledge. So when I say quality education, I mean the job of teachers like yourself and others is to teach children that how do you use the knowledge that you get in the classroom? How do you apply it in your everyday life? How do you apply it to make yourself more productive? How do you apply it to make life easier for people who are poor at the bottom of the pyramid? How do you apply knowledge? That is the whole test of good education, quality education.
But I would like to add, in this case, it is absolutely true. I agree with that. But in order to understand application level, we need to come. I mean, we need because now education is fragmented. That's why we cannot link to anything, I mean, which is around us in real life. Education has become something artificial, and the walls of education institutions, they divide something which is absolutely artificial and cannot be linked directly with our real life, because everything is
Yes.
fragmented. It is divided into subjects, subject into chapters, everything, and no one understands what we, if every time when I ask people, for example, what do you apply from all these many years of your schooling in your life? So usually nothing. They are just stuck. So many years
Yeah.
are lost. So that, in my understanding, we need to bring back that kind of holistic picture, holistic knowledge, and it should be dynamic knowledge. This is very important part,
Absolutely.
because the most, I would say, the tragic of our education system overall, I mean, education system, which now still keeps on just, you see, functioning, is that we gave an idea that knowledge is something which is has end, something which is final, so that you
Mm.
just learn the chapter, you pass the test, you know.
Which of course is not.
If we just open the perspective that the more you know, the more the points of touching the unknown, and you need to face this unknown, you need to be uncomfortable with it, you need to be strong, different kind of skills to learn, to find out more. This is what life is
Yes.
about. In order to connect, to apply this education, we need to understand that life keeps on moving, and the
Yes.
knowledge
Yes, you're
in the
right.
same way should be dynamic.
Another hallmark of education of an educated person, you must have an inquiring mind.
Absolutely.
You must always want to know what is the root cause. It's no use knowing what are cutting the branches. You have to go to the root of everything, and that is how I've arrived at the root cause of India's backwardness is poor education.
Yes, education
And
is.
another thing that we need to do is we need to build bridges between the academy and industry, between academy and agriculture. There are no bridges. Here, academy is in one silo, industry is another silo, agriculture is one silo. You need to
Yeah,
have bridges. And
not even.
unless you have that connectivity, you can't apply knowledge.
Absolutely agree. And you see that idea, because I mean, coming back to our topic that everyone should be, and linking with your now idea that industries, science, they should be not only bridges, they should have educational, I would say, component, so that we
Yes.
need to create educational environment. I mean, which is not only within the education institution walls. It should be everywhere. For example, if you go to so that educational component should become, I would say, a new revolution for, education upgrade. If we create this open educational environment with lifelong upskilling,
Yes.
reskilling,
Lifelong learning. Yes. Lifelong
in this
learning.
case, everyone can be evangelist of this quality of education, because they can
Yes.
link directly to where they are, what they do. So, and they can.
Yes. And when you become an evangelist means that you put pressure in a democracy. That's a great advantage. You can put pressure on government and say, listen, government schools are in very poor shape. Spend more money. This is how you spend the money. Cut here, cut there, spend more here, reduce over subsidization of higher education, cut down middle class subsidies, and put more money into foundational literacy and learning. And that is the way forward.
That's great. And Dilip, I would like to because just a few months ago, your Education World magazine celebrated 25 years of unending publication. So this is a great achievement, and congratulations. So it's a really great work. And perhaps my last question, which I would like to ask you as a professional and as a person, I mean, personal question. How do you think, these 25 years of this work to bring awareness, to bring a real content, what education needs, because this is what you have been doing for all these years. You are just
Yes.
like a fighter, bringing that kind of new level, trying to bring the education level up with every new magazine. So how do you think how your magazine contributed to this development of education strategies, I would say, or even content?
How connected? Sorry, I didn't get the question.
The
What?
question is how education world, what is the contribution of education world in bringing awareness that it should be on a national agenda during all these
Oh,
years?
no, I think we've been quite successful. We're now, our mission was to make education the number one item on the national agenda. It's not number one yet because there are a lot of people, we don't have the readership which we should have had, because in India there are 1.4 million schools, there are 45,000 colleges, undergraduate colleges, and there are 1,100 universities. If we could put one copy of Education World in all of them, then our message would have gone to everybody and we would have been more successful than we are. Nevertheless, I believe we have created a great awareness of education. We are not top of the national agenda, but we are somewhere near the middle. And today, I think there is national consensus that education is very, very important for national development. And we continue to ignore education. Whatever dreams we have of a developed India and so on are going to be pipe dreams. Pipe dreams, like mirage. So I think that awareness has is percolated into society, and the new education policy and so on has taken a lot of our message, which is inside the policy, and they provide some hope for the future.
Okay, thank you, Dilip, for this very interesting conversation, multi-layered, touching the policies, touching the problems. Not many people, they like to touch these painful, topics, but I'm very thankful to you for your openness and that kind of sincere discussion of these questions. And we end it with the hope, which is also very good, because we need to have a hope for a better future, because there are really good things happening in education in India, what I can just judge from my point of view. So
No.
hopefully we will just bring the education to that level where we can one day, let's have a hope.
Yes.
That
Yes, a pleasure talking to you. It's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Marina. And I must also thank you for coming all the way from Russia to help our mission to make education better for children and bringing your inputs from your society, which has had much greater progress in education than we've had. So thank you also for
yes,
your
thank
help
you
and advice in education.
It was
Thank you.
a really great pleasure to talk to you. All the best to you and your
Okay.
team. Waiting for your
Okay.
new.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.